Hello, friends. Welcome to Book Fuels. Today, we're going to talk about The Art of Risk by Richard Harris. Shubham was an ordinary man living in a small town, busy with his work. Every day, he would go to the office, return home in the evening, and spend weekends having a little fun. But somewhere deep down, he felt lost. There was a monotony in his life. One day, Shubham's eyes fell on a pile of books outside a bookstore. He had a habit of making a New Year's resolution every year, and this time he had decided to do something adventurous with his life. But he had no idea how to bring adventure into it. He scanned through the books, and one title instantly caught his attention: The Art of Risk, what we can learn from the world's leading risk-takers. He picked it up and flipped through a few pages. After reading the first few, he decided right then and there that he had to buy it. That same evening, he bought the book, sat comfortably in his room, turned off the TV, put his phone on silent mode, and began reading. The first chapter was titled Embrace Carefully Managed Risk. Shubham thought, what a boring topic. What's so special to learn about risk? But he kept reading anyway. Slowly, Harris's words began to pull him in. The author wrote that taking risks doesn't mean you put your life in danger for no reason. True risk takers are those who analyze every risk first. They think about the worst-case scenario and what steps they can take to avoid it. Shubham suddenly remembered a time back in college when his friends had invited him to go bungee jumping. He was too scared to go, but his friend Arjun went. Later, Arjun told him that the bungee jumping company had already prepared every possible safety measure. Back then, Shubham thought Arjun was crazy, but now he realized that Arjun wasn't reckless. He had taken a calculated risk. As he kept reading, Shubham felt like Harris was speaking directly to him. Shubham, you never take any risks in your life. You always stay in your comfort zone. But have you ever thought about how your life could change if you started taking calculated risks? He continued reading. The book shared the story of a mountaineer who had prepared for years to climb Mount Everest. He trained his body for extreme conditions and assessed every decision along the way. He took risks, but they were planned, and that's why he succeeded. Shubham closed the book and thought, can I do something like this in my life too? He closed his eyes and asked himself, what's the biggest fear I keep avoiding? The answer came immediately: failure. I avoid everything because I'm afraid I'll fail. But Harris was saying the exact opposite, that instead of fearing failure, he should analyze it. Think about the worst-case scenario. If he prepared himself for that, maybe he could win. Right then, Shubham decided he would take a small but meaningful risk in his life. But which one? He took out his diary and started listing things he had always wanted to do but never tried because of fear. The first thing he wrote was, start my own business. Shubham had always been passionate about photography and thought that if he became a freelance photographer, his creativity could take flight. But then the doubts would creep in. What if I don't get clients? What if I fail? What if I can't earn money? This time, Shubham did something different. At the bottom of his list, he wrote, what's the worst that could happen? He listed his worst fears. 1. Not getting clients. 2. Financial struggle. 3. People making fun of me. Then he began addressing each fear. If I don't get clients, I can start by doing free shoots for friends and family to build my portfolio. If I face financial struggles, I can take a part-time job. If people make fun of me, let them. My life is mine, not theirs. What had previously been just thoughts in his mind were now turning into actions. The next day, he used his savings to buy a decent camera. He was still a little scared, but Harris's words kept motivating him. Confidence comes from preparation. He went to a small garden in his city and started practicing. He took nature shots, candid photos of children, and slowly began to feel that photography was his calling. A few weeks later, one of his friends was getting married. That friend casually said, Shubham, our wedding photographer canceled last minute. Can you take some pictures for us? For a moment, Shubham thought of saying no. But then he remembered the first lesson from Harris's book, Embrace Carefully Managed Risk. He told himself, I prepared for this. What's the worst-case scenario? If the photos aren't good, they'll scold me. But at least I'll get a chance to learn. He said yes and photographed the entire wedding. When he edited and sent the photos to his friend, The reaction was exactly what he hoped for. "Shubham, these are amazing. You've beaten the professionals." That day, Shubham realized that taking risks doesn't mean putting your life in danger. It means facing your fears and conquering them with planning and preparation. After this experience, the story didn't end. It was just the beginning. Shubham now had many new questions and dreams. The next chapter of the book was going to inspire him even more. For Shubham, the book was no longer just a book. It had become a companion, guiding him through every new step. The confidence from the first lesson had filled his life with new energy. Now he was excited every day to turn to the next page. One evening, after dinner, he opened the book and saw the second lesson, the importance of resilience. He started reading the first paragraph, where Harris had written that every person should face challenges in life. Doing so strengthens one's mental and emotional endurance. Shubham thought to himself, maybe this lesson isn't that relatable to me. Why would I need resilience? But then he began reading the chapter in depth. Harris explained that resilience isn't just for tough times. It's equally important in daily life. When we fail repeatedly but still get back up, that's when true strength is built. Shubham asked himself, is there any challenge in my life I've tried to face but failed at? Immediately, an old memory came back. In college, he once took part in a debate competition. He was confident in his speech, but when he reached the stage, his legs began to shake, his voice trembled, and he forgot the entire speech. Since then, he had never tried public speaking again. He assumed he just wasn't made for it. But now, this book was changing his thinking. Harris wrote that instead of running away from failures, we should try to learn from them. That's what builds self-confidence. Harris also shared a story of a mountaineer who tried to climb heights multiple times, but failed again and again. Every time he fell, he got back up stronger and eventually fulfilled his dream of reaching the summit. Shubham thought, if he can do it, why can't I? In his diary, he wrote, 1. Become good at public speaking. 2. Take on one new challenge every week. The next day, there was a meeting in his office. Shubham usually tried to avoid the boss's gaze so he wouldn't have to speak. But this time, he challenged himself. When the boss asked who would present the team's update, Shubham slowly raised his hand. Everyone was surprised. Shubham himself was nervous, his palms sweating. But he reminded himself, Harris said to face the fear. If I fail today, I'll do better next time. He began speaking. At first, his voice was low, but slowly he grew more confident. When he finished, the boss smiled and said, "Good job, Shubham." That was clear and precise. That day, he realized that the fear of failure often exists more in our imagination than in reality. When we actually face it, it doesn't seem as big. In the book, Harris compared resilience to a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Shubham took this analogy to heart. He started giving himself small challenges. One day, his friend Arjun invited him for trekking. Shubham was afraid of heights, so his first instinct was to refuse. But then he remembered Harris's words, "Comfort zones make us weak. Step out and discover your strength." Shubham decided to go trekking with Arjun. The path was not easy, steep climbs in some places, narrow rocky trails in others. At one point, his fear of heights overwhelmed him. His legs trembled, and he felt he might fall. Arjun encouraged him, saying, "If you're afraid of falling, just focus on one step at a time. Don't look at the entire height, only the next step." Shubham took it slow, focusing step by step. With each step, his fear lessened. When he reached the top and saw the breathtaking view, it felt like he had left his fear far behind. On the way back, he realized resilience wasn't just about physical strength. It was also mental strength. If he had given up halfway, he would have never seen that beautiful view. Now Shubham's mindset had changed. He began seeing every challenge, big or small, as an opportunity. He started taking photography more seriously. Some people praised his work, others criticized it. Before, criticism would upset him. Now he saw it as a chance to learn. A few months later, there was a big photography contest. Shubham felt it was a great opportunity, but famous photographers were participating. He doubted whether he could stand a chance against them. Then he remembered Harris's second lesson. The worst-case scenario is that my name won't be on the list, but whatever I learn will help me move forward. He submitted his best photo. When the results came out, his name wasn't among the winners. He was a little disappointed, but instead of quitting, he asked the judges for feedback. They told him his photo needed improvement in lighting and composition. That same day, he started working on those areas. He practiced daily, took photos at small local events, and kept trying to get better. Now, this lesson from the book had become a part of his life. He realized resilience isn't only for big failures. It's equally needed for everyday challenges. By now, the story had reached a point where Shubham was trying to become a better version of himself every day. But Harris's book still had more lessons to teach him. It was as if a new chapter in his life had opened. Every day, he discovered more about himself, and whenever he faced difficulty, he remembered a lesson from the book and tried to learn from it. The book was no longer just a guide. It had become a friend. One evening, while it was raining on his way back from work, Shubham decided he would read the third lesson that day. At home, he made himself some hot tea, sat in his favorite corner, and opened the third lesson, understanding the line between reckless and courage. The very first paragraph of the third lesson had Harris asking, "Have you ever thought about which things in your life you do without thinking, and which things you never dare to do because of fear?" Shubham found the question intriguing. He asked himself, have I ever been reckless? Or am I always so cautious that I never give myself the chance to show courage? Harris wrote that there is a very fine line between courage and recklessness. Many times, we label other people's actions as reckless when, for them, those are calculated risks. It all depends on a person's mindset and preparation. Shubham suddenly thought of his friend Arjun, the same one who had insisted he come trekking. Arjun often did high-risk adventures, paragliding, skydiving, scuba diving. Shubham always felt that Arjun was unnecessarily risking his life. But now he realized that maybe Arjun wasn't reckless. Maybe he was courageous and exploring his boundaries. This thought made Shubham reconsider his own actions. He admitted to himself, I use other people's courage as an excuse to hide my own fear, calling it recklessness. But the truth is, I never try to push my own limits. For the next few days, Shubham spent time introspecting. In his diary, he made 2 columns. Things I avoid because of fear. Things I do without thinking. In the first column, he wrote, 1. Heights. 2. Public speaking. 3. Starting my own business. In the second column, he wrote, 1. Making impulsive decisions. 2. Sometimes spending money without thinking. 3. Doing certain things just because others are doing them. Shubham noticed that a large part of his life was either driven by fear or by impulsive actions. He was neither taking calculated risks nor truly exploring life with courage. In the book, Harris shared the story of a stunt pilot. Every day, that pilot risked his life performing stunts, but before each one, he would meticulously plan, analyze every possible danger, and have an emergency landing plan ready. To people, his stunts looked reckless, but in reality, everything was calculated. This story struck Shubham deeply. He decided he too needed to understand the difference between courage and recklessness in his own life, and that he would explore his boundaries, but only with full preparation. The first chance to put this thought into action came the same week. At work, his team was assigned a new project. The opportunity was there for someone to be the project lead, but it involved considerable risk. If the project failed, the whole team could suffer losses. At first, Shubham thought, better let someone else take it. But then he asked himself, is this fear holding me back? Am I calling it a reckless decision when it might actually be a calculated risk? This time, he decided to step up as project lead. He worked closely with his team, made detailed plans, assessed every possible risk, and when the project began, his preparation showed. At first, there were many challenges. Some people disagreed with his decisions, but Shubham calmly took their feedback and made adjustments. In the end, the project was completed on time and earned the company a good profit. That day, Shubham learned that courage doesn't just mean taking a big risk. It means understanding your fears, recognizing your strengths, and making an informed decision. But the story didn't stop there. One day, Arjun called again. this time with a plan for skydiving. Shubham's heart began to race. His fear of heights was still there. But this time, he wasn't going to back down. He asked Arjun, "When you go skydiving, what do you think about? Aren't you scared?" Arjun smiled. "I am scared. But before boarding the plane, I check my preparations. I know that if I've followed all safety measures, nothing will go wrong." Shubham thought, can I do the same? Can I face my fear? He decided to go for the dive, but only after full preparation. He researched the company, checked their safety records, spoke to the instructor, and only when he was sure it was a calculated risk did he say yes. When the time came to jump from the plane, his heart was pounding. But as soon as he felt himself in the air, the fear disappeared. He was living in the moment. That day, he truly understood Harris's third lesson. The difference between courage and recklessness is only in your mindset. If we understand our limits, face our fears, and take steps with full preparation, every challenge becomes an adventure. Now Shubham's eyes were set on the fourth lesson. He felt that each chapter revealed a new side of his life, and he was ready for it. By now, he had learned how to build resilience, how to distinguish courage from recklessness, and now it was time for the next lesson, learning from failure. He turned the page and began reading. Harris wrote, "Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone toward it. If you're not failing occasionally, you're probably not challenging yourself enough." These lines made Shubham think deeply. He asked himself, do I see my failures as stepping stones, or do I just try to run away from them? The first thing that came to mind was the debate competition where his loss had crushed him so badly that he never set foot on a stage again. Then he remembered the photography competition where, after losing, he took feedback and improved his skills. Harris wrote that instead of avoiding failure, we should try to learn from it. Every setback has something to teach us. The greatest risk-takers have sharpened their abilities through failures. Shubham decided to start logging his failures. In his diary, he wrote, 1. Failure. Lost in the debate competition. Lesson learned. Lack of preparation and how to deal with nervousness. 2. Failure. Lost the first photography competition. Lesson learned. Improve lighting and composition. He realized that whenever a failure happens, he shouldn't see it only as a loss, but as an experience. A few days later, Shubham was given the responsibility to prepare and deliver a big office presentation. He worked hard on the slides and organized his points well. But on presentation day, the projector malfunctioned and half the slides didn't display properly. This threw off his rhythm and shook his confidence. Afterward, the boss praised his effort but said some key points were missed, so the project didn't get immediate approval. Shubham felt bad, thinking he had let his team down. But then he remembered the book's lesson, analyze your failure. There's always something to learn. He asked himself, what did I go wrong? He realized he hadn't checked the technical setup in advance. If he had tested the projector earlier, the problem could have been avoided. He immediately made a note. For every future presentation, test equipment beforehand, always have a backup plan. This small failure had taught him a big lesson. In the book, Harris told the story of a mountain climber who once attempted to climb a peak without proper planning and fell. After that accident, he never gave up. He focused on his planning, improved his gear, and changed his strategy. A few months later, he climbed the same peak successfully. Harris wrote, failure doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. This struck Shubham deeply. He thought, if that climber had given up, would he have ever reached the top? Shubham began applying the same perspective to his photography. He started displaying his photos at local exhibitions. At one exhibition, a man criticized one of his pictures, saying, the composition is weak, the background is too distracting. At first, Shubham felt bad, but then he took the criticism positively. The next week, he worked only on composition. He failed many times, but with each attempt, he learned something new. Gradually, his pictures improved. One day, Arjun came again, this time inviting him to a cycling marathon. The distance was 100 kilometers, and Shubham had little cycling experience. He was afraid he might not finish, but he thought, if I fail, so what? At least I'll know my limits, and next time I can do better. He decided to participate. The route was tough, and midway he felt he couldn't make it to the finish line. But he told himself, This isn't failure. This is part of the process. Every pedal makes me stronger. In the end, he didn't complete the marathon, but he cycled 75 kilometers. His knees hurt, but his heart was full of pride. He told Arjun, "I may not have reached the finish line today, but next time I will. Today I learned I need to improve my endurance." Harris wrote in the book, "The most successful people aren't afraid to fail. They're afraid of not trying at all." That thought stayed in Shubham's heart. He decided he would treat every failure as an opportunity to become better.